Chapter 16. You and Yours. It was the end of the day, their second since moving deeper into Kerith. The sun was just stretching its rays along the tips of the tents when the war horns began to blow from the eastern flank. A cloud of dust hung in the air, followed by billowing smoke. Men rose from beside the cooking fires, and the clatter of arms sounded within the camp. In the king's circle of tents, squires hurried to help their masters buckle armor and tack their horses. Gail had Barnaby ready in short order, as she kept his saddle and bridle close and always ready. The king himself, in shining mail and a glittering half-helm, rallied the knights and nobles of the high houses. As Darryd mounted Barnaby and Gail handed him his sword, Sergeant Callum came running past.
"Sergeant, what news?"
Darryd called out. Red-faced, sweat wringing beneath his arms, Callum panted.
"Morvant raiding party killed a few men and set fire to some tents. They have been repelled. They're already riding back from whence they came. They must have seen our numbers and grown afraid."
Already the king with his cavalry was riding down the central thoroughfare, the royal compound emptying as warriors, idle too long, leapt to join the fight. "My lord," Gail said, nearly swallowing her words, "might I be so bold as to offer counsel?"
"It is welcome,"
Darryd said with a narrowing of his eyes, Barnaby stomping his hooves beneath him. "Might you call the king back?" Callum, who had remained close by and overheard, snorted.
"You forget yourself, horseboy."
"Let him speak," Darryd said, raising his hand. "We are surrounded by buttes and box canyons. I know because the squires and I scouted them yesterday. Perfect ground for an ambush. The Morvant have kept their attacks small and their numbers hidden by design. They now make an attack with the setting sun in their eyes and follow with a swift retreat. I reckon it's a feint to draw out our cavalry."
"You mean to say that they plan to attack the body of the camp?"
She shook her head. "Twilight is not the time to start an attack of armies afield. It's more in keeping with their methods to try to wound the body by attacking the head."
"The king?"
She nodded.
"How can you be so sure?"
Darryd asked. Because it was what she would have done as Avenger Red. But there was no percentage in that argument for her now. Her mind raced to invent a rationale. A night in the caves on the edge of her father's territory came to mind. She saw raindrops chaining in puddles, cedar boughs dancing in the wind, and smoke curling from a fire. And she remembered that mercenary Cody had told stories from the Islay War. "My father fought in the Islay War, on the losing side. They were often against overwhelming numbers, but had the advantage of fighting with the indigenous people, who knew the territory better than the invaders. These are tactics they would have used," Gail said.
"If the king is in danger, more than he realizes, I must be at his side. For this is Kerith, and I know these lands better than most in his party."
Darryd pulled on Barnaby's reins, steadying him.
"Do you want me to teach a lesson to this squire, Captain? Teach him his place?"
Callum asked.
"No, Sergeant. I will proceed to the king's side."
"I caution you, sir. It is a trap," Gail said.
"Alex, armies run on order, even if you and yours don't. God be with us."
He kicked Barnaby and was gone. Gail was left staring at the fire pit. So lost in thought was she that she did not notice Callum step up alongside her until he had taken her by the collar and dragged her into the tent. The table fell over as he threw her into the interior.
"About time you learned the order of things around here, runt."
Before she could pull herself upright, he planted a kick into her gut that sent her reeling and lit the corners of her vision with spots of color. There was no fighting back. If there was any time she loathed her lot in life, her freakish smallness, it was now. Without weapons, she had no advantage. She curled into herself, trying to protect her head from the blows that kept coming, each sending shards of pain through her body. Callum was breathing through his teeth, leaning on the leg of the overturned table while he stomped on her. Her entire world was reduced to the shocks of pain and the intervals in between. Time was fluid, malleable, seconds dragging out like eternities. Nothing existed except the knowledge it might not end, and that, in truth, she deserved every blow. The faces of so many children, forced into labor, torn from their families, tortured, killed even, flashed in her mind, each one accusing her. She was guilty, not for the insubordination Callum accused her of, but things so much worse. Callum lifted her up by the hair and stretched her neck back. His face was close to hers, the cut sewn shut on his cheek, bending like a second, scowling mouth. She recognized the same feeling of insight into herself and her life that she had experienced in the fountain. Somehow, it allowed her to surrender, to prepare for the worst. This was the beating she had been earning her entire life. "Do your worst," she heard herself say. Tears streaked down her face, but not tears of fear as Callum surely thought. Tears of release, for only in this suffering and the inevitable end she sensed coming would the scales ever be tipped right. The journey that had begun in the font was coming to an end. He cocked his head sideways before a grin exposed his teeth. "Who do you think?" But he never finished his rejoinder. His head snapped forward with a loud thud, and his body fell limp and heavy across her. No sooner had his weight pressed down on her than it was rolled away. She looked up to see Patrick looking down at her, Kevin behind him, one of the logs from the unlit fire outside in his hands. "Alex, are you all right?" She spat a gob of red blood and felt one of her teeth had gone missing. "Just desserts," she said. "What are you talking about?" Patrick asked. What was she talking about? For the things she had done, she had deserved to die, not to be saved. "Why was he beating you?" "A lifetime of wrongs." Patrick and Kevin glanced at one another. Her mind was still stuck on justice. Surely if she was still breathing, it had not been measured out completely. But maybe there was reason in it. There was something she and only she could do. The clue lay in Darred's words before he left. "Order," she said, rolling onto her side, then into a sitting position, her head throbbing. "Callum did not like it that I didn't respect the order of things. Armies run on it." "That is no reason to beat you," Patrick said. "I deserve it more than you know," she said, looking up into his eyes and spitting again. She pulled herself up by the same table leg that Callum had leaned upon. "The king is riding into a trap. We've got to help him."
How do you know?
Kevin asked, letting the log drop to the floor. "Call it an informed hunch. I tried to explain it to Darred and Callum, but the truth did not work."
"So what do we do?"
"Lie, of course." She turned to the armory chest, opened it, and drew out her bow and quiver. She slid on her baldric and both swords. The daggers she had planned to trade she shoved under her belt. "Lie to whom? What are you saying?" Patrick asked. "The other squires. If I'm wrong, the foot soldiers need to stay here to repel any further attacks. They're too slow anyway. The squires, they each have horses, though." She smiled to herself, knowing she was taking a page from King Talamar's book. "Tell them the king ordered for them to follow. They will be more than happy to prove themselves." "But who is here with the authority to order them?" "Nobody but us, and that means there is nobody to stop us." "But did the king really order this?" Patrick looked confused. She met them both in a wordless stare.
"Don't answer him," Kevin said. "We won't question. But you better be right."
"I hope I am."